Hello, everybody. On this episode, I have Emma Seppala with me, and she is a happiness expert. I asked her if that was an okay moniker for her, and she said yes.
Moniker for her, and she said yes.
So
Thank you so
welcome,
much,
Emma.
Russ. Thank you so much, Russ.
Yeah.
It's great to be here.
Most of my people are sort of dealing with some sort of anxiety, almost by definition robs you of happiness.
Puts you into this sort of survival mode.
A lot of people had sort of trauma when they were younger.
Trauma when they were younger.
One of the things that I often say is that when you have trauma as a child,
you learn that life is about protection.
You learn that life is about protection, growth, instead of connection and love and support. When you're a child, you learn life is about connection. You learn life is about connection. I guess comes from that.
Happiness, I guess, comes from that
kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where would you start? Where would you I imagine people come to you saying, how do I find happiness? How do I find happiness? And where do you start with people?
Yeah.
And where do you start with people?
Yeah. Anxiety's so rampant right now. I just feel like it's a way of life. I just feel like it's a way of life by our lifestyle at the moment. And of course, that's been created by our lifestyle at the moment. And of course, there is trauma right now are really stressful.
Yeah.
I think it's probably really stressful. Few and far between. I think it's probably people don't have high stress levels. Few and far between. I think that people don't have high stress levels. I think life is stressful as well. But I think that one thing I have seen in my research is that one thing I have seen in my research is that what I call psychological sovereignty, with which we can navigate psychological sovereignty, with which we can navigate with a greater grace, unpredictable life, happiness, with a greater grace. I'll just share my own story.
Sure.
I was in New York City during 9/11, and after that day at 8:30 a.m. every day,
Sure.
I was in New York City during 9/11, and after that day at 8:30 a.m. every day, I would go to Bikram yoga, hot yoga, and it would shake. I glowed, and I had a six-pack. I didn't know what to do. I would go to Bikram yoga, I would follow these Tibetan monks around, and I'd go to all the talks. I glowed, and I had a six-pack. How I felt when I was with them, but it was like I was trying to buy osmosis, to try to gain some food. I would follow these Tibetan monks around, and I'd go to all the talks. It wasn't until I stumbled into a breathing class. It was like I was trying to buy osmosis, to try to gain some food. It is a really special breathing class that I learned to practice. It wasn't until I stumbled into a breathing class, and I was able to move on, and I was able to move forward successfully and navigate special breathing class. All the things I had to navigate. So that I kept doing that practice, and then I went and did a PhD in psychology and sovereignty back. Started doing research, and I was able to move on. And on the road, I was hearing about all these veterans coming back with post-traumatic stress from all the things I had to navigate. Iraq, Afghanistan, and I thought and I kept doing that practice, and then I went and did a PhD in psychology and therapeutic approaches that were not necessarily helping everyone. A lot of on the road, I was hearing about all these veterans coming back with post-traumatic stress from Iraq, Afghanistan, and I thought side effects of medication. And I saw, a lot of the medication and the therapeutic approaches were not necessarily helping everyone. A lot of people falling through the cracks or didn't even want to over your trauma again and again, which can be very challenging because for people. And side effects of medications, so I thought, and also this breathing practice helped me. Maybe it'll help them. Some of the therapeutic practices that are being used then, at least, were about some initial funding and we ran a study, which is over at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was doing my postdoc there with Richie Davidson, and so I thought, we worked with, so there were two groups. There was an active group who got the breathing practice. They did a one-week-long breathing class, initial funding, and we ran a study, which is originally University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was doing my practice itself. It's originally from India through the yoga tradition, but it's not the kind of thing you would learn in a yoga studio. It's taught specifically by a nonprofit called Art of Living. So there were two groups. There was an active group who got the breathing. It's offered by they did a one-week-long breathing class, which is really nice. They did it at no charge, by the way, which is originally offered online. I can tell you more about the practice itself, but it's originally from India through the yoga tradition, but it's not the kind of thing you would learn in a yoga studio. It's taught specifically by a nonprofit called Art of Living, normalized, or for veterans, military. Not just in what they reported, Project Welcome. Maybe they were just trying to be nice, right? They did it at no charge. Physiologically, so what we had a paradigm that offered a startle response. Anyone who has anxiety, so what we found was that after be elevated when anxiety is high, who went through the and with post-traumatic stress, it's very elevated. And we saw it not just in what they reported. The participants would be in a room, nice, right? And the lights would go on physiologically. So what we had was a paradigm that measures startle response. Which anyone who has zero anxiety is mildly anxious. For someone with that, the startle response can be elevated when anxiety is high. It's very alarming. And with post-traumatic stress, it's very elevated. I did not want to stress people out, but we had protocol where startle in some way. So the participants would be in a room. Like some of the lights would go on and way more noxious. And there would be noise through headphones.
I get it.
Which
sounds like fun.
So anyway, what we found was that the more their anxiety, for someone with post-traumatic stress, the more very alarming. We actually saw it physiologically. They startled less. I did not want to, and I remember one of the veterans, he had been through the SEERS program, which is the prisoner of war training, and my colleagues really intense, way more. And he said, "This is worse than the SEERS program." He was telling me this before. So anyway, what we found was that the more their anxiety, they reported lower anxiety. He just sat through it like the more. We actually saw it physiologically. They spent a month later and a year later. And I remember one of the veterans, he had been through the SEERS because we program, which is the prisoner of war training, and the Marine Navy. They were also really intense. So that was really, and he said, this is worse than the SEERS for us program. Like he was telling me this before. Psychologists, learned breathing, and afterward know how long something's going to last. And it just seems like just going through the program acutely sort of reshifts the nervous system, normalizes. A month later and a year later. I often think of post-traumatic stress as just being kind of locked into sympathetic activation every day for a week. Maybe they were fight or flight.
Sure.
So that was really like that, eye-opening for us because kind of recalibrates you back to, we don't know how long something's going to last. And some people ask, like just going through the program acutely sort of reshifts the nervous system and normalizes. Did, and one actually became an instructor. I often think of post-traumatic stress. They were there for being kind of locked and they found sympathetic activation. So locked into the fight or flight, but they actually maintain the benefits. It has like it seems like that we call like an acute effect method. It was lasting. Kind of recalibrates you back. It's interesting. There was actually a documentary made about it called Free the Mind. They followed our studies, so if anybody's ever interested in watching that. Free the Mind. It's available on YouTube. A couple did, and one actually became an instructor.
Free the Mind, is that what's called?
They were there for the money. Yeah, you could throw it in the show notes if you want, but it's a documentary. They actually followed me and someone else doing another study. We call it an acute effect. And it's really amazing to see the veterans go through it, before and after.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There was actually a documentary made about it called Free the Mind. They followed our studies. So if anybody's ever interested in watching
is really the state of
Free the Mind,
alarm
it's available on YouTube.
Sympathetic nervous system Free the Mind has an effect with that as well.
You could throw it in the show notes if you want, but it's
our autonomic nervous system.
A documentary
is like a
filmmaker followed me and someone else doing another study and made that film.
The parasympathetic, the rest and
it's really
digest is
amazing
up.
to see the veterans go through it, before.
Now, when people with anxiety. We're looking on-off switch. This kind of whole premise of my work is really it's like there's anxiety. They always kind of have the foot alarm, the gas and the brake at the same time. Sympathetic nervous system certainly. And I guess what has an effect with that is that it does create this vagus nerve potentiation where it's like a teeter totter. It feeds back into the brain. The brain allows the body to relax, which allows the brain to relax, and it just goes into this sort of virtuous sympathetic instead of the vicious cycle. Now, people with anxiety is where the sympathetic alarm in your body is kind of these horrible thoughts in your mind. You really know it's like meaning making makes sense. They always kind of have the so it makes these horrible thoughts based on how you feel in your body. And I guess which of course makes your breath feel worse. Is that it does create this vagus nerve potentiation where so anything you do to break the cycle, and I even get people the body to relax, which allows the brain to relax, and it just goes into this sort of virtuous cycle. There is something of the vicious cycle. Taking control of anxiety is where because I remember years ago sympathetic alarm in your body triggers these horrible thoughts in your mind. When you're in the middle of anxiety, making makes sense. Anxiety is actually so it makes these horrible thoughts based on how you feel in your body. It's breathing to facilitate your body feel worse. Because it's like you're behind this tree and you get in. There's a tiger on the other side of the tree. So anything you do to break the cycle, and I even get people to do like really high in your chest sigh and that kind of thing. And you just even holding your breath, afraid to move. There is something about taking control of your breath. Because I remember years ago listening to this person and they said, it does stimulate that vagus nerve, which kind of gives you this global sense that things are okay. Then the thoughts come down like, I guess things are okay. It's breathing to facilitate it sort of gets interrupted. So it's like when we behind this control of our breath, there's a tiger, and we don't allow the anxiety to run our breath anymore. So your breath gets really high in your chest. Actually, we do have sovereignty. You're afraid to breathe. You're afraid to move. We do have some control over the situation. As you breathe more, because the worst thing about anxiety moves is that you never know when it's going to end. It does stimulate that vagus nerve, which kind of gives you this global sense that things are okay.
Right.
Then the thoughts come down like, I guess things are okay. And the whole cycle sort of gets interrupted. So when we take control of our breath and we don't allow the anxiety to run our breath anymore, I said, what's wrong? And he said, Jake was in an IED. So Jake was a Marine Corps officer in charge of we do have some control
going across Afghanistan, and all the vehicles passed safely, but Jake drove over an improvised explosive device. And in that moment,
yeah, that's
when he looked down,
right.
I mean, he was severely,
and it's interesting because there's with breathing,
someone would go into shock
acute
and just faint.
Short exercise
in the moment, like
remembered a breathing exercise.
12 years ago, my husband walked in the room, was pale. I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Jake was in an IED." Jake is his friend, a Marine Corps officer in charge of a vehicle and a convoy going across Afghanistan, and all the vehicles passed safely, but Jake drove over an improvised mind explosive device to his first. And in that moment, which is to give orders to call for help. When he looked down, I mean, he was severely of mind to check on the other service members in the vehicle. Usually, someone would go into shock and mind to tourniquet his own legs and to prop them up. Jake remembered only when everything was done did he fall unconscious, and he was later transported to Germany and the US. Something if he hadn't done these things he had read about in a book, he would have died that day. And he started to engage in that both his legs. He did that. Injuries were that severe. He was able to, but he's alive, he's well, he's maintain his presence of mind. He's doing amazing. I just talked to him the other day. Active duty, which is to give orders to call for help. There's the presence of mind to check on the other service members in the moment. It gave him the presence of mind to tourniquet his own legs and another form of breathing exercise, like the one that we studied in our said and done in research. Unconscious, and he was later transported urgently to Germany and then to have a lower. If he hadn't done these things, lower levels of anxiety, he would have died that greater levels of calm. Both his legs, the injuries throughout the day, kind of like when you go. But he's alive, he's well, he's exercise your muscles, so you're stronger. He's doing amazing. But you can condition your nervous system, to be calmer, and that's powerful. That's also those. So there's the acute sovereignty, like in the moment. Let me try and regain myself. But there's also the training form of breathing exercise, and that's where the sky breath meditation that we researched. We've also studied it with another veteran population to have a lower, comparing it to the gold standard therapy levels of anxiety, greater levels of calm, which is cognitive processing therapy throughout the day. Kind of found that it was at least to the gym, as good as that, if muscles, but better even at the level of the brain in terms of your nervous system, emotion regulation, to be calmer, and that's powerful. So there's a conditioning. So there's the acute sovereignty, like in the moment. Let me try and regain myself with this particular. Also the training. This is like a 20-minute practice. That's where the sky breath meditation that we researched. So it's fascinating. We've also, there's a lot studied it with. We've also with another veteran population with undergraduates, comparing it to the gold standard therapy for. And we found that stress, which is multiple different processing interventions, and we found that it was at least we looked at emotional intelligence training, but better even at the level of the brain in terms of the breathing protocol, that emotion regulation had the most impact. So there's a conditioning that is just addressing the mind. I love meditation. You're not just particular curriculum. Also doing this like physiological sort of reprogramming, and it's fascinating. There's a lot there. I also personally don't think that mindfulness is the best approach for anxiety. Anxious. Speaking for myself too. I remember at after 9/11, mindfulness was just starting to get popular. We looked at emotional intelligence training, and you just sit here and just become aware of your anxiety. You're just getting more anxious. It's horrible. The most impact. And we think it's you're not just addressing the mind.
Well, the thing that I find too is being able to
addressing the mind. You're also
have some sovereignty to keep using that word over your own thinking, because a lot of what happens, and this is what happens when people with panic attacks.
Talk about meditation too. I personally don't think that mindfulness is the best approach for anxiety.
Felt like my body
for
was
myself
tingly,
too. I remember at night
my
after
breathing
9/11,
might have been
mindfulness
a
was
little bit weird or whatever. And then they have another, and they have another,
sit here and just become aware of your anxiety. You're just going to get more anxious. It's horrible.
Maybe this is a stroke. The thing with the whole go ahead. So a lot of the thing that I find too is being able to okay, how can you understand, have some sovereignty to keep using that word over your own thinking? But the problem is a lot of we get into that survival physiology, norepinephrine in the brain, epinephrine in the body, cortisol in the body, they just feel weird. We lose that rational part of our brain. My body was tingly. So cognitive therapy, my breathing might have been housed in this rational part of our brain, which it is, and then shutting. They have another, and they have another brain off, and then they think, this survival maybe I'm having a heart attack. It's going to leave you when you need it the most. Then, so that's when ideally we want to use a lot of cognitive therapy to be able to kind of just comes out, leave our thoughts. Okay, how can you understand? Which is what kind of meditation does, and change your cognition. Unfortunately, if you're anxious and you go into this get into that survival physiology, your brain norepinephrine in the brain, epinephrine in the body, cortisol in the body, and the brain. It's looking for something to do. It's looking for something to hang on to. Of our brain. And because since we're children, cognitive therapy, we use our brain, we use our cognition part of our brain, which it is. So we get shutting this lulled into this part of our brain off security that our thinking is going to save us. It's going to leave you when we get into these worrisome situations. Ideally, we want our thinking, which is why people get into anxiety and rumination, because when you were a child, it did
have the semblance
which is
of
what
working.
kind of
It creates some
meditation
dopamine
does.
in your brain.
But unfortunately, if you're anxious and you go into this quiet period, so even worry gives you this automatically sense of all these feeling a little better physiologically for something to do. It's looking for something to hang on to. Worry, and because everything gets children, so you get this we use our brain, we use our cognition to kind of save us in thoughts. So we get more alarm in your body, into this and then it keeps going. Security that our thinking is going to save us. So when we get into these worrisome situations, we double down on our thinking, which is why people get into anxiety and rumination, because this situation, when you were a child, cognitively it did have the semblance of working. But when you have the more control you can create in your body, the more you can make that decision, like the soldier did. So even worry gives you this false sense. So that's why I'm not a big fan of mindfulness for anxiety in the moment as an initial therapy. But then you believe the worry over the course of time, everything gets worse. You gain so you get this vagus nerve potentiation, vagus nerve sort of relaxation in your body in general. And then it keeps going. You can start introducing that kind of thing. You're able to actually meditate. But meditation in and of itself, there is this kind of in and of itself just feeling like not an avenue towards healing anxiety initially. It's not a great method to use to start. But when you've been a meditator for years and you're anxious in your body, the more you can make that decision like the soldier did. But it's not a great entry level in the moment for this sort of thing. Staying there. The breathing. So that's why I'm not a big fan of mindfulness for anxiety as an initial therapy either. Over the course of time, once you gain some, and this vagus nerve potentiation, vagus nerve sort of, can you give us a little short version of what it's about in general? Sure, you can start introducing that kind of thing. You're able to actually meditate, but meditation in and of itself, if you go to yoga class, and mindfulness in and of itself is not an avenue towards healing anxiety initially. It's not a great method to use to start. If you've been a meditator for years and you're anxious,
and it's a series of breathing practices put together in a certain way.
The breathing definitely is.
And then during the actual class, you do a longer session of that. So the class itself has this effect, like we found in our study.
And the sky breath, like what
helping so much with trauma.
Can you give us a little short version of what it's about?
It's like 20 minutes a day. And it's like a protocol. They have different breathing techniques, really transformational. And then in our studies, we found that too. So if you go to yoga class, you learn like research on breathing. And a lot of my fellow psychologists, research scientists were at the beginning. We're like, why are you doing research on breathing? It was like to learn it with an instructor. Now that's the only thing I can say. You want to learn it the proper way. And it's a series of like even my breathing practices put together. He was in a certain way. The emotion regulation researcher out there at Stanford University. During the actual class, you do a longer session of that. So actually, the class itself has this effect, like we found in our study.
Was that Richie Davidson?
Helping so much with trauma
we need
right now. But you get a take home. It was interesting to see their perspective, and now 20 minutes a day. And for me, I just felt like it was
and I think the old school
really
is
transformational. And then in our studies, we found that too. So that's why I ended up doing research on breathing, and a lot of my fellow psychologists, research scientists were beginning. We're like, why are you doing research on breathing? It was like not a thing. Now everybody's a breathwork master.
I call it the illusion of getting better, because if you give somebody
it was like
these kind of therapies,
my advisor,
when they first enter a university situation and they do a questionnaire on how anxious are you or how depressed are you or whatever,
breathing,
and then you do 12 weeks of these therapies, and then they give you that questionnaire at the end of the 12 weeks. Yes, of course you're going to be better. We have actually used some of that cognition, but as you were saying earlier, it doesn't last. Like when we see these people a year later, even after they've gone through these cognitive behavior therapy,
I've seen people spend
$5,000-$10,000 on CBT,
acceptance,
and then a year later they're coming to see me, and it's
has a very strong cognitive
leaning. Like it doesn't
was
work.
Kind of the gold standard
exactly
at the time,
because
it does
CBT is housed in a rather I call it the illusion part of your brain
of getting better.
Because if you give
somebody
get into this survival physiology,
you lose the cognitive part of your brain.
When they first enter a university situation and they do a questionnaire on how anxious you are, how depressed are you, and
Andrew Huberman talks about 12 weeks
of physiological side, which I believe they give you the questionnaire amazing 12 weeks. Yes, of course you're going to be better. I don't think it's something that use some of that cognition, but as you were saying earlier, long-lasting, permanent changes. Like when we see these people a year later, even after they've gone through these short bursts. I think you do need to have something that lasts
on CBT,
10, 12,
and then
15,
a year later they're coming to see
minutes,
me, and it's like
in order that the nervous system and
it doesn't work.
Unconscious
and
hypervigilant mind kind of goes.
CBT is housed in a rather cognitive part of your brain,
We'll be
and
okay.
when you get into this survival physiology, pranayama, when I did yoga, part of your brain.
Certified as a yoga meditation teacher,
it leaves you when you need it the most. Whereas breath work,
for the first 5 minutes after doing the practice,
Andrew Huberman
still
talks about too, the physiological side, which I believe is
10 or 15 minutes later, that's when the effects seem to come in.
I don't think it's something
that's
that
what I would see with people that
create
would not want to practice
long-lasting,
permanent changes
immediately
in the
nervous
system.
I mean,
because it's a short
burst.
I think you do need to have something that lasts 10, 12, 15, maybe 20 minutes
that you
in order
condition
that the nervous
yourself
system
to operate
and
conditioning to do it all the time.
hypervigilant
People
mind
have to
kind of
go
say,
I have to sit and do my breath work now.
You know,
for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, people
and what
are
I used to notice with pranayama when I did yoga, because I certified as a yoga meditation teacher as well,
the benefit from it.
Then they start doing it on their own.
5 minutes after,
and that's what I would notice with people doing.
Felt
even Stan Grof's work,
but
the
10 or 15 minutes later,
that's when the effects seem to come in. So that's what I would see with people that would not want to practice because it doesn't immediately
it's learning
this is something I need to do,
but it doesn't.
And if there is something that is sort of regimented in there, it's almost like hot yoga. You go through the same poses over and over again.
Anxiety.
If there is something in breath work where you do operant conditioning to do it all the time, people have to kind of say,
and you
I have
learn
to sit
them
and do my breath work now.
In and of
and for
itself,
the first
it'll create
2, 3,
this
4
sort of
weeks,
island of
people are
safety
like,
for you.
and as long as you
it's
keep
a chore
practicing
to do
it, and then
you'll
after
get
that,
better.
when they start
But
seeing the benefit,
I
I
know
know
I'm
going on here,
then they start doing it on their own.
Our ego,
and that's
what
I
call the ego dragon within us. Even Stan
believes that the worries were keeping us
the
safe.
hyperventilation kind
So
of breath work.
anything
we do,
that
to move away from worrying,
it's considerable amount of effort
creates
to do it.
more stress and more worry.
It's learning
it's
like
breaking
this
through
is something
initially,
I
and I think
do.
that's one of the things
and if
that
there
breathwork
is
is really
something
great
that is
for,
sort of regimented
it breaks
in there.
through
It's
that
almost like hot
initial
yoga. You go through the same
hesitancy and
poses
resistance
over and over again
to doing
If
something
there is
that actually
something in
changes
breathwork
your
where you
mental
do
and physical
these
state. Varied breathwork sequences, and you learn them
Yeah.
in and of itself.
And I
It'll
think we live in a
create this
world
sort
where
of
that's
island of
not
safety
really,
for you.
we're
And as long as
constantly
you keep
engaged in
practicing
something,
it, you'll get better.
watching
But the
something,
problem
hearing
is, and I know
something,
I'm going
interrupting
on
our
here,
own selves
is that
to look at
our
our
ego,
phones and
this
look
what
at
I
the
call
many
the ego
things going on.
dragon
And
within us,
you can
believes
go
that the worries were keeping us
all
safe.
day, starting from
So
the moment you wake
anything
up,
we do to
not
move away from worrying,
taking
and
care
many
of
people
your
do,
nervous system,
creates
not taking
more
care of
stress and
yourself.
more
Yeah, and
worry.
that's why I
So
wrote
it's
my latest book,
breaking through
Sovereign, because
initially, and I think that's one of
we
the
need
things
to
that breathwork is
take
really
the
great
reins
for,
back
is that it breaks through that
on our
initial
nervous system
hesitancy
and
and
the way
resistance
we're living, the
to doing
choices we're
something that
making.
actually
And when
changes
we
your
do that,
mental
we
and
can
physical
be
state.
in, like you said, that island of safety. Not all the time, because life is tumultuous.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, and I think we live in a world where that's not really. That's what I call
we're constantly engaged in
sovereignty,
something.
the ability to go back,
Watching
there.
something,
And
hearing
we know
something,
that we're
interrupting
there
our own
sometimes.
selves to
Between,
look at our phones
between
and
anxious
look at the many
moments or
things
between
going
difficult
on.
challenges, there's this time where
You
it's
can
like, oh,
go
everything is okay right now.
Mhm.
All day. That is the
starting from
sovereignty.
the
And
moment you wake
we
up,
can train ourselves
not
to be there more and more and more and more.
taking
And many
care of
people
your
do,
nervous
yeah.
system,
And,
not taking
I
care
think
of
there's
yourself.
a significant
that's why I wrote my latest
dissociation.
book, Sovereign, because
Like
I'm just
my
like, we
theory
need
about
to
anxiety
take
is
the reins
the
back
state of alarm.
and
It's locked
on
in
our
your
nervous
body,
system,
usually
and
from trauma,
the
from
way we're
childhood. Not
living,
always,
the
but a lot
choices
of
we're
it
making.
is from that.
And when we do that,
And
we
if
can
we
be
can
in, like you
break
said,
that
that island of
cycle
safety.
and show ourselves we can
Not
break
all the
that
time,
cycle,
because life is tumultuous, but
it empowers us.
that
It gives us a
that
chance,
we have
because
that to go back
so
to,
much
and
of
that's what I
anxiety
call
is
that
this sense of
psychological
victim
sovereignty,
mentality that goes
the
along with
ability
it.
to go back
It's probably
there.
been there since you
And
were a
we
child.
know that we're
So
there
if you grow
sometimes
up with victim
between,
mentality, if you
between
feel like you
anxious
don't have
moments
any
or between
agency
difficult
over this
challenges,
thing
there's
you
this
call
time where
anxiety,
it's like, oh, everything is
you're
okay
going to
right
feel
now.
like a victim.
That
And
is
that
the
victim
sovereignty, and we can
mindset
train
and
ourselves
mentality is going
to
to be
be there more and
self-perpetuating.
more and more.
So
and more
how
and
can
more.
you do something that
And I think there's a
empowers you,
significant
so you feel like you have
dissociation,
some sovereignty?
like
you
my
don't feel like you're
theory
a
about
hapless
anxiety
victim in
is
the wind
is the state of
from this
alarm
thing that you
that's
call
locked in
your
your
anxiety,
body.
usually from trauma from childhood. Not always, but a lot of it is from
Yeah, and I
that.
think there's,
And
there are
if
many
we can break
different,
that
there
cycle
are several
and show ourselves we
methodologies,
can
many
break
we
that
can
cycle,
use. The question is
it
to
empowers us. It
apply
gives us
them
a chance,
and
because
really use them.
so
And I
much of
think,
anxiety is this
what
sense of victim mentality that
one
goes
thing
along
that
with it.
a lot
It's
of
probably been there
people
since you were a child.
suffer
So
from, that
if
I
you grow
see.
up with
I
victim
teach leaders.
mentality,
That's
if you
my
feel like
day
you don't
job.
have any
And
agency
I'm not
over
doing
this thing
research.
you
I
call
teach
anxiety,
high-level corporate
you're
leaders
going to
at
feel
the
like a
Yale School
victim.
of
And
Management
that
come in.
victim
And no matter how
mindset and
talented
mentality
people
is going to
are,
be
no matter how many
self-perpetuating.
degrees
So
they
how
have,
can you
MDs,
do
PhDs,
something that
most of them are
empowers
running
you
around
so you
with
feel like you
very
have
high
some
levels of
sovereignty? You don't feel
self-loathing.
like you're a hapless victim in the
Self-criticism
wind
is very
from
high.
this thing that you
And
call your
pretty much
anxiety.
95% of the room, But that one person or two people who don't have that problem,
Yep.
different.
Are so
There are several methodologies
They
many
are
we can
sovereign.
use. The
And
question
think,
is to
what is it about
apply
those
them
people?
and
really
use them. And I think
how you can be
what-
around certain people and
one
you
thing
feel
that
drained after.
a lot of people
And then there's other people you can be
suffer
around
from
and you feel
that I
uplifted.
see.
I teach leaders, that's my day job.
This is a toxic
research.
person.
I
teach
high
my
level
question
corporate
is,
leaders
how
at the
many
Yale
of us
School
are
of
in a
Management
toxic
come in.
relationship with
And
ourselves?
no matter how talented people are,
And no matter how
when
many
we can
degrees
start
they
to
have
turn that around,
and
which for a lot of
PhDs,
people, it's like, I remember when I
most
first
of them
heard
are
this
running
years
around
ago, this
with
idea of
very high
self-love.
levels of
What the heck?
self-loathing.
It's cheesy sounding, and what the hell do you do such a thing? It's so bizarre.
Pretty much,
but
95%.
I realized over time, and that those people who are most sovereign, or two people who don't have that problem,
know how to take care
of themselves.
They are
the way,
sovereign.
We all know, with children, everyone has a child.
What is it about
knows,
those people?
They had enough to drink. They had enough to eat. They've been outside.
How you can be around certain
we know how to
people
take care. You feel
of another.
After.
And
then there's other people you can be around and you feel uplifted.
Inward.
And taking care of yourself. And starting with this is a toxic person.
Did you drink enough today? Did
you
eat enough today?
Did you go outside?
How many of us are in a toxic relationship
the way you would
with
your
ourselves?
pet,
Totally.
And it's like
when we
retraining
our
that
brain,
around, which for a lot of people it's
to
like
take
I remember when I
care
first
and
heard this
nurture
years ago, this idea of
ourselves.
self-love.
Yes,
I was like, what the heck?
Incorporate
It's
the breathing
sounding, and
practices.
what the hell do you do
Incorporate
such a thing?
Incorporate
This
other
is
things
bizarre.
that soothe you.
But
For you, it might.
I
For
realized
someone,
over
it might
time,
be painting.
and
that
for another
those
person,
people
might
who
be
are
music.
most sovereign.
Nature is beneficial,
Know
so deeply,
how
profoundly
to
beneficial
take
for
care
everyone. I mean, the
of
research has shown
themselves.
this. The way,
So
we all
much,
know,
and, nobody markets it because
nobody's making money off of that.
Exactly.
But it's
They've
been outside.
but even if
we
you
know
can't
how
go
to
out
take
into nature,
care
having a
of
picture
another
on your desk has an effect. That
and turning that
deeply wired
inward.
for it. And
but
taking
starting
care
to,
of the self, and
taking care of
starting
the
with
basic needs
basics,
and then incorporating
hey,
those
did you
things that
drink
are
enough today?
soothing.
Did you eat enough
today? Did you go outside?
For,
the basics, the way you would with your pet.
Is a really great way to start and to know how to
our
bring yourself back.
To
I'm
take
coming back,
care and
coming
nurture
back to me, coming back to my
ourselves.
island
And
of
then,
peace.
yes,
Incorporate the breathing
that
practices,
internal balance,
incorporate the meditation,
Yeah,
incorporate
that
other things that
self-loathing that you talk
soothe you.
about
For
that
you, it might. For
so
someone,
many
it
of
might be
us suffer
painting.
from.
For another person, it might
there
be
is a
music.
part of our brain called the
Nature is
posterior cingulate
beneficial,
cortex.
so deeply, profoundly
doesn't matter,
beneficial
but I
for
call it the
everyone. I mean, the
PCC.
research has shown this
So the posterior
so
cingulate
much.
cortex is a
And, nobody
a part
markets
of what
it
we call the
because
default
nobody's making
mode
money
network
off of
in the
that.
brain. Exactly.
But it's
So
profound.
default
But
mode
even if you
network
can't
is
go out
what
into
your
nature,
brain
having a
does
picture on
when
your
you're
desk
not
has an effect.
actively
That
focused on a
We're
particular
so
task.
deeply wired for it.
So we
but
default back
starting
into
to,
this state. Now, the
taking care of the
posterior
basic
cingulate
needs and then
cortex, which is a part
incorporating
of the
those
default
things
mode
that are
network,
soothing,
is thought to be involved
for
in self-referential
your
thought. In
nervous
other words,
system,
what you think of yourself.
is a
So if
really
you
great
grow up
way
in an
to start and
environment
to know how to
where
bring
you
yourself back.
feel
I'm coming back,
challenged
coming
or
back to me, coming back
abused
to my island of
or
peace,
abandoned,
regaining
you
that
create this narrative
internal
within
balance.
yourself that I call jabs. That
judgment,
self-loathing that you talk
abandonment,
about, that
blame, and shame.
so
You judge
many of
yourself,
us
you
suffer
abandon
from.
yourself, you blame yourself, and you
There is a
shame
part
yourself.
of our brain called the
In this
posterior
posterior
cingulate
cingulate
cortex.
cortex.
In this
Name
part
doesn't
of the
matter,
default
but I
mode
call it
network.
PCC.
So when our brains aren't
So
doing
the posterior
something,
cingulate cortex is a
and we have this
part of what we
strong
call the
inner
default
critic,
mode network,
which
in the
is
brain.
the PCC as
So
well.
default
We
mode
default
network
back
is
into
what
this
your brain
negative
does
self-view
when
of
you're not
ourselves,
actively
which of course
focused on a
feeds this
particular
victim
task.
mentality, and the victim
So we
mentality
default
feeds
back
our
into this
nervous
state. Now, the
system. It
posterior
tells us that the
cingulate
world
cortex,
isn't
which
safe.
is a
So
part of the
of
default
course we're
mode
going to have an
network,
advanced startle
is
reflex.
thought
Of course
to be
we're going to look at
involved
the
in
world like it's an
self-referential
unsafe
thought.
place.
In other words, what you
because
think
we're
of yourself.
continually. So
When
if
we
you grow up
default,
in an
when we're not
environment
doing something
where
specific, you
we default
feel
back into this
challenged
negative
or
view of ourselves,
abused
which creates this victim
or
mentality, which creates
abandoned.
more anxiety.
You
So
create
it's
this
no wonder
narrative
that
within
people
yourself
fall
that I
into
call
distraction or
judgment,
dissociation, into
abandonment,
the intellect
blame,
or
and
the
shame.
phones
You
or
judge
whatever,
yourself, you
because
abandon
it
yourself, you
takes us
blame
out of
yourself,
that
and you
default
shame
mode
yourself.
network, because the
In
default
this
mode
posterior
is
cingulate
so
cortex,
in this part of the default
for so
mode
many
network.
of us.
So when
And
our
I
brains
think
aren't doing
breath
something,
work, a lot of
and we
autonomic
have
nervous
this
system
strong inner critic,
re-regulation,
which is
pulls
the
us into
PCC
this
as
state
well,
where we can
we
be
default back
connected
into this
to ourselves
negative
at the same
self-view of
time,
ourselves,
and we don't have
which
to
of course
default
feeds this
slide
victim
back into
mentality, and the victim mentality feeds our nervous system. It tells us that the world
feeds
isn't safe.
anxiety,
So
depression,
of course we're going to have an
eating
advanced
disorder,
startle
OCD.
reflex.
Of course we're going to look at the
Personality
world like it's an unsafe
which I
place.
believe a lot
Because
of these
we're
things
continually
come from when we default,
not
when we're not
being
doing
regulated
something
as a
specific.
child.
We
And I
default
look at
back
the
into
kids
this
of
negative
today,
view of
and they're
ourselves,
not
which
being
creates this
regulated.
victim mentality, which
So
creates more
why aren't we
anxiety.
teaching like
So it's no
breathwork in
wonder
schools?
that
I think we
people
are. I think
fall
there
into
are some
distraction or
programs out there that are
dissociation
starting
into
to
the
teach
internet or the phones
kids
or whatever. I'm going to go on and tell one more story. Out of that default mode network. I have two grandkids, Abiel, who's 6, and painful and Angus, for so many of us. And I think my daughter puts them to bed around 7 o'clock every night. Autonomic nervous system re-regulation
together. They sleep in the same room.
Pulls us into this state
And
where
Leandra
we can
noticed that they were really quiet,
connected to ourselves at the
so she
same
walks
time,
down the
and
hall
we
and she
don't
pokes
have
her
to
head in and
default
just
slide
"What are you
back
guys
into
doing?
that.
You're awfully quiet in here."
self-referential
And Abby, who's six,
negative
says,
thought pattern.
"Oh, we're just
that feeds
practicing our
anxiety,
box
depression,
breathing, eating disorders, OCD,
and she's 6 and 4,
personality
right?
disorders."
And this is what she's learned,
which
at
I
school.
believe a lot
and
of
it's
these
really
things
helped
come
them
from
not being regulated as a child. And
Yeah,
I
that
look at
is
the kids of
so
today,
nice. I mean,
and they're not being
I know
regulated.
my
So
children,
why aren't we
8,
teaching
they're
like
9 and
breathwork in
6,
schools?
they
I think we
practice
are.
it.
I think there are some
I've taught
programs
them.
out there that are starting to teach.
I mean, I haven't taught them.
kids,
I
and
put them
I'm
in a
going to go
class
on
where
and
they
tell one
learn
more
the
story.
sky breath
I
meditation
have
for
2
kids, and
grandkids, Abiel, who's
yeah,
6,
every morning
and
that's the
and
first
Angus,
thing
who's 4.
that we do.
And my
I
daughter
wish
puts
I
them to
had
bed
learned
around
it
7
then.
o'clock
And
every
too.
night, and she
and
noticed,
I've
and they talk to
met
each other.
some
They
of
sleep in
the
the same room.
college students who have
And Leandra
learned this,
noticed that they were
since
really
they were little,
quiet.
and they are a
So
level
she
of
walks down the
maturity
hall and she pokes her head
that's
in, which is,
well
"What are you
beyond
guys doing?
their
You're
Oh,
awfully
yeah.
quiet in
and
here."
also
And Abby,
confidence in
who's 6,
themselves,
says, "Oh,
love
we're
of
just
themselves,
practicing our box breathing."
and it's a beautiful thing.
And
And I
she's
have
6
hope
and
for the
4,
world when I
right?
see
And then
that.
this is what
Yeah.
she's learned at school.
Me too.
And it's really
I always
helped
said
them. To me, anxiety is a separation of your adult self from your child self.
Yeah, that is
You know, the
so
adult
nice.
doesn't
I
want to
mean,
go back to the child
I know
because the
my
child holds all their
my
pain.
children,
And the
8,
child
9, and
mistrusts
6,
the
they
adult
practice
because the
their.
adult's been around
I've
for
taught them.
decades sometimes and has
I
kind
mean, I
of
haven't
ignored
taught
them.
them. I put them in a
And it's
class where
also
they
a
learn the
separation
sky
of your
breath
mind from your
meditation for
body.
kids,
So a
and
separation of the adult self from the child
yeah,
self,
every
and it's a
morning
separation
that's
of
the
mind
first
from
thing
body.
that we do.
So what
And
breath work does is it
I wish
is
I
it
had learned
sort
it
of
then, and
joins your mind and
and
your body
I've
together
met some
into
of
this sort of
the
functional whole.
college
You know, it takes
students
these
who have
disparate parts that
learned
are,
this, since
kind
they
of
were
highly
little, and they are
sympathetic
a level of
and pulls
maturity
them into this functional
that's
whole.
well beyond
And that creates
their
the
classmates.
groundwork
And
to
also
actually
confidence in
start
themselves,
using
love
that
of themselves,
connection
and
to your younger
it's
self,
a beautiful
to
thing.
the part
And
of
I
you
have
that
hope
was,
for the world
say,
when I see
abused
that.
or lost their parents at a
Me
young
too.
age, or
'Cause
was
I always said
abandoned
that
or bullied
to
or
me,
neglected,
anxiety is
or
a
had to mature
separation
too
of your
early,
adult
or
self
was
from your
shamed.
child self.
We
You know,
have
the
this
adult doesn't
place
want to go
in
back
our
to the
autonomic
child
nervous
because the
system
child
that
holds
will
all their
provide
pain,
us with the
and the
foundation
child
to actually
mistrusts
do
the
the
adult
work
because
that we
the
need.
adult's been around
So I
for
think
decades
breathwork
sometimes and has
opens
kind
up
of
that
ignored them.
door, and I think
it's
the
also
final
a separation of your mind from your body. You know, for those of us with trauma, not for everybody,
and it's
for
a
those of us
separation
with
of mind
trauma,
from body.
is being able to have
So
that
what breathwork
foundation, that
does
stable
is it
autonomic foundation,
sort of
to be able to go
joins
back
your mind and your body
and experience
together
some of the
into
trauma
this sort of
that we went through
functional
as children
whole.
in a safe
It takes these
environment
disparate
to be able to
parts that are,
reprocess it.
kind
So
of
it's not
highly
always
sympathetic
sitting in the background.
and pulls
in
them
my
into
book, I
this
talk about
functional
background
whole.
alarm,
And that
which
creates
is this
the groundwork
sense of
to actually
physiological
start
alarm that got stuck in our
using
body
that connection
when we were children
to
and it's
your
still
younger
there.
self. So
to the
unless
part
we
of you that
actually
was, say,
go in and
abused
heal
or
that
lost
state
their
of
parents at a young
physiological
age,
alarm
or
in
was
our
abandoned
body,
or bullied or
we
neglected,
never actually
or
really
had to
get out of
mature
that
too
victim
early, or was
mentality
shamed,
that feeds
you
the
know, we
anxiety.
have this
So it's really
place
this
in
sort
our
of
autonomic
win-win
nervous
situation
system
that
will
when we can
provide
start
us with the foundation
regulating our
to
autonomic
actually
nervous
do the
system
work
so
that
we know
need.
that we're safe.
So I think
And once we're in a safe environment,
opens up that
we
door,
can bring
and I
that
think the
child in
final
us who
icing
still
on the
feels
cake
like they're,
is, you know, if you look
for
at the
those of us
amygdala,
with trauma,
which has no
not for
sense of
everybody,
time, for those of
there's
us with
part of
trauma,
us is being
that
able
stays
to
frozen
have
at the time of our original
stable
trauma, and that could be
autonomic
5,
foundation
6,
to
7,
be able
8,
to
10,
go
12
back.
years old.
And
So once we
experience some of the
regulate our
trauma that we went
body,
through as
we have a
children in a
chance
safe
to go back
environment
and to be able to
rejoin
reprocess
that
it.
child.
So it's
and
not
create a
always
functional
sitting in the
state in our
background.
mind and body.
In my
create a
book, I talk
functional
about
state
background
between
alarm,
the adult self and the child
which is
self.
this
sense of
That's my little
physiological alarm that got stuck in our body when we were children.
And how does that?
And
So
it's
you
still there.
mentioned earlier
so
on,
unless
like
we actually
how do you
go
take
in
the
and
reins
heal
back?
that state of
So
physiological
how would you
alarm
suggest
in our
that?
body,
Like, what's your new book
we
about?
never actually really get out of that victim mentality that feeds the
I
anxiety.
hadn't found
So
the
it's
term
really
in
this sort of
psychology
win-win situation when we can start regulating
become
our
aware
autonomic nervous system so we
the
know
ways in
that
which
we're
we
safe.
stand in the way
And once we're in a
of our
safe
own
environment, we can
happiness, but
bring
also
that
potential.
child in us who
Sure.
still
And
feels like they're, if you
I
look
didn't
at the
find a term for
amygdala,
that in
which has no
psychology.
sense of
So
time, there's
I
part
use
of
the
us
term
that
sovereign,
stays
sovereignty,
frozen at the
Yeah,
time
I
of
think
our
it's a good
original
one.
trauma. And
which
that could
is,
be
about
5,
how to
6, 7,
regain
8,
that
10, 12
inner
years old.
freedom
So once we regulate our
by
body,
looking at the
we have a
different ways
chance to
in our
go
life
back
that we
and rejoin that
stand in
child
the way
and
of
create a
that,
functional
take it
state
back.
in our
So
mind and body and create a
the
functional
book is
state
divided
between
into
the adult
multiple
self and the child self. That's my little rant.
areas, starting with the self and how to reprogram yourself from that.
You mentioned earlier on, like
go and then looking at emotions
how do
and
you
how
take
we
the reins
tend to
back. So how would you
suppress our
suggest that?
emotions.
Like, what's your new book about?
What that does for us, and the addiction process, and other things that we do,
found
because
a
we
term
have
in
not learned how
psychology
to feel our emotions, like you rightly said.
The ability to become aware.
The third chapter looks
the
at
ways in
our
which we stand in the way
and
of our own
regaining our sovereignty,
happiness, but also
there,
potential.
I also look at intuition in another chapter.
I didn't find a term for
the
that in
mind.
psychology. So,
The mind is,
I use the term sovereign.
we cram it full of stuff all the time.
I think it's a good one.
And we forget
how to regain that
to
inner
freedom and power. be discerning by what it is that we fill our minds in our life. What you are what you eat is true. Stand in the way of that.
Yeah.
To take it back. So also, the book is divided into multiple, pretty much all the different areas of our life. Where are we standing in our
starting
own way,
with the
and how
self,
can we clear that and reclaim our sovereignty to have, and how to reprogram yourself from that self-loathing. Go and then looking at emotions, not just show up as our best selves, but as our suppress our emotions. Most people do, and
Yeah, I
what
think
that does for
sovereignty
us.
is a good term. I haven't
the
heard that
addiction
before.
process
I think
and
it's a
other things that
brilliant
we
term.
do because we have not learned how to feel our
Allows you
emotions
to
like
be
you rightly said.
connected within yourself and not really relying on something outside. You
our
can
relationships
kind of bring it
and,
in if it's your choice,
regaining our
but it's
sovereignty.
not like you've got
There,
this,
I also look at
like I said,
intuition
victim
in another
mentality, or you've
chapter.
got this sort of
The body, the mind,
dissociative overlord
mind
over
is,
you because you have this trauma
cram
in
it
you,
full of
and
stuff all the time.
you have to dissociate into,
and we
I call it
forget
MAD,
to
M-A-D-D, so medication, addiction,
be discerning
distraction, or
about what it is that we fill our mind with.
Those are the
'cause
things
what
that
you are,
typically,
you are
when
what
we
you eat is
have
true of
this
our mind
victim
too.
mentality, this alarm in our system,
Also,
those are the four
how
things
to
that we
clear
go
it.
to
So
try and get ourselves out of it. And
pretty much
really,
all the
it's
different
learning,
areas of our
okay,
life. Where
how
have
can
we
we face
where are
the
we standing in
dragon?
our own
How
way, and
can
how can we clear that and
how can
reclaim our
we
sovereignty?
feel
to have
regulated? And that's what I was saying
greater
earlier on
access to
about
our
regulating the autonomic nervous system. How
ability
can
to
we
not
feel
just show
regulated
up
and safe
as
enough
our best selves,
to
but
go
as
back into those
our most
places
fulfilled
and
selves as well.
reprocess them? Yeah, I think sovereignty
Because
is a
like
good
I said,
term.
the
I haven't
amygdala
heard
has
that
no
before.
sense of
I think it's a
time.
brilliant
It
term.
remembers your traumas.
It just
And there is a
allows
theory
you
that
to
says
be
that when you get
connected
traumatized
within
as a
yourself
child,
and not really
part of you stays
relying
at that
on something
emotional
outside.
level for the rest of your life. Of course, the
kind
other
of bring
parts
it
of
in
you
if it's your
kind of
choice,
learn how to fill
but
in the
it's not
gaps
like
and that
you've
kind of
got
thing.
this,
But part
like I
of you
said,
gets
victim
locked into that
mentality, or
same
you've
old
got
place.
this sort of
And there is a part of our brain called the
dissociative overlord
insular
over you
cortex
because
that's
you
right in
have
the
this
middle of our
trauma
brain,
in you,
which is
and
kind of like
you
the
have to
way station
dissociate
between
into, I call
body
it
to
MAD,
mind
M-A-D-D,
and
so
mind to
medication,
body.
addiction,
And I believe that the
distraction, or
insula, and there's a lot of
those are the
research
things
around
that
this,
typically
when we
insular
have
cortex
this victim
starts
mentality,
to
this alarm
misfire
in our system.
So
Those are
the
the four
insular
things
cortex
that we
kind of
go
gives
to
us a sense
to
of
try
our
and get
body
ourselves
and
out
a
of it.
sense of ourselves.
And really, it's
And if we have
learning
trauma
okay,
when we're
how
younger,
can we face
and those
the dragon?
connections
How
within
can
the
we,
insular cortex
how
and the
can we
amygdala and the
feel
prefrontal
regulated?
cortex,
And that's what I was saying
get
earlier on about
interrupted?
regulating the autonomic
We
nervous
don't have
system.
this sense of
How can
ourselves,
we
and
feel
we don't have this
regulated
sense
and
of our
safe
body.
enough
So we're
to
kind
go
of in
back
this
into
no
those
man's
places
land
and
of
reprocess
emotional
them?
dysregulation,
Because, like I
with
said,
no
the
way of
amygdala has no
finding our
sense of
way
time.
out. It remembers
So what
your
I think
traumas.
breathwork does,
And there is a theory that
and
says that
finding
when you
that
get
younger
traumatized
version
as a
of you
child,
and seeing
part
them,
of you
hearing them,
stays
loving
at
them,
that
open to
emotional
them,
level for the
and
rest of your
defending
life.
them.
Of course, the other
is
parts
really
of you
part of
kind
that
of learn how to
holistic
fill in the
process
gaps
of,
and that
again,
kind of thing.
like finding
But part of you
sovereignty.
gets locked into that same old place. And there is a part of our brain called the insular cortex that's right in the middle of our brain, which is kind of like the way station between.
Well, thanks for
body
joining me,
to
Emma.
mind
That was
mind
great.
to body.
And I believe
how do
that the
people find your
insula,
book? How
and
do
there's a
people
lot
find
of
you?
research around this.
You can go to
Insular cortex
emmasepala.com or
starts to
iamsov.com,
misfire.
iamsov.com.
So
the
the insular cortex kind of gives us a sense of our
coming up
body
on
and a sense of
Signs of Happiness and
ourselves.
Sovereignty.
And if we have trauma when we're
Instagram
younger,
at the Happiness
and those
Track.
connections within
It's
the
pretty
insular
much most
cortex and the
social media
amygdala and the prefrontal cortex,
The happiness
get
track is
interrupted,
your Instagram handle, right?
we don't have this sense of ourselves,
Okay.
and we don't have the
Happy to
sense of our
collaborate
body.
if that's helpful.
So we're kind of
Yeah,
in this no
absolutely.
man's
Yeah.
land.
Well, thanks for joining
of
me.
emotional
I'll put this out
dysregulation
as
with
soon as
no
possible.
way
I
of
think it's
finding
really
our way
important for
out.
people to understand
So what I
that
think
there are
breathwork
things that they
does,
can do,
and
outside of the
finding that
traditional
younger
going
version
to a
of
therapist
you and seeing them, hearing
talking
them,
about
loving
your
them, open
traumas,
to them,
which again,
and
what you
defending
pointed out
them
at the start, is
kind of
really part of
re-traumatizing
that
in a lot of ways.
holistic process.
If we don't
of,
give
again,
our body
like finding
a
sovereignty.
foundation, and this is my wife Cynthia's work. She's a somatic trauma therapist, and as am I guess in a way. We're both trained in Peter Levine's somatic experiencing. And it's really
thanks for
this
joining me,
ability
Emma.
to create this
That was
safety
great.
in your
We'll,
body first.
You
And
know,
once you create the
we'll
safety
talk
in
now.
your
How
body,
do people find your
then
book?
the
How
other
do people
things
find you?
fall from that. But if you don't create that safety in your body
you can
first,
go to
everything else you do is temporary.
emmasepala.com
And I
or
see that all the time. So you can feel better after cognitive therapy, absolutely. But it doesn't tend to last because there's no foundation there. There's no physiological foundation for it to ground and root and take hold. And I think that's what your work is kind of showing people, is that
The happiness track is your
we need to go with the
Instagram handle, right?
physiological first, and then the psychological second.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Emma. We'll talk again.
I'll put this out as soon as possible. I think it's really
for now.
important for people to understand